Hi, this is Bill Kenower of Author Magazine, and today we're talking to Margaret George, author of the novel Elizabeth I. We sat down at Third Place Books in Lake Forest Park and discussed how a writer takes the dry facts of history and turns it into something entertaining. Enjoy.
We were very lucky, actually, that the very formative years of my life, 7, 8, and 9, I lived in Israel. And I was already knew all these Bible stories, and I was very excited about going to where I could go see where Jonah set sail to see the whale, and where Lot's wife turned into a pillar of salt. And it turned out my school, which was a very strict Scottish Presbyterian school.
In Israel?
In Israel, yes. It had been there since the 1920s, long before there was in Israel. It was called the Tabitha School because it was supposedly on this very place where Peter had raised Tabitha from the dead. So I was surrounded by all this. We used to go to archaeological digs, and my father also was very interested in the Crusades, so we would visit Crusader castles. And I prevailed on him to take me to Egypt because we were studying ancient history in my school, and I wanted to go see Egypt. And of course, Israel and Egypt had no relations at all at the time, but he concocted some kind of diplomatic excuse for how to go to Egypt, and so he took me to Egypt. And you know, I was just so into all this, and it really felt so real to me. And he has a picture. There's a picture that he took of me it was on the flap of the Cleopatra hardcover of me standing in front of this statue, and I was about 9. He said, "This is the real you." So I was not formally trained in history, but that's kind of misleading because I was very involved in it, and I loved reading history, but my knowledge is very spotty. Because I didn't major in it, I didn't have to learn parts of history that I didn't care about, like the Corn Laws in England and that kind of thing. And I think that's what people don't give historical novelists enough credit for, because they seem to feel sometimes that a historical novel is nothing but a bunch of note cards all taped together. You know, with your research, it's like you start out with a little note card here, a 4x6 card, and you just staple them all together, and then you have a historical novel. But you have to actually make it a real novel. I mean, it has to be interesting. The characters have to engage, and you have to give it an arc. You have to give it a theme so that it's going somewhere. It can't just meander around and like, oh, they did this, and then there was a law, and then so-and-so invaded, and then I got sick and died. It's no story there. Some people don't care about accuracy, and they're not going to be called on it. But now I have this reputation for accuracy, for almost a twilight zone between fiction and nonfiction. So I can't really make things up with the freedom that some other people can. But I also don't want to really be imprisoned by things. So yeah, it's hard to walk that line, and the worst thing is you don't want to be dull. Isn't that the worst sin is the writer can commit, is to be boring? I love Shakespeare, and I found him a great challenge because mainly he couldn't quote himself. In other words, how did Shakespeare talk? Did he talk like he did in his plays? He can't go around saying to be or not to be, or you know, I'm thinking of a good line for something. And yet he had to sound intelligent. He was obviously frighteningly intelligent, but we know that he also, you know, liked life and being at the tavern and the Dark Lady and all. How do you make this person this great icon, you know, a real person, without descending into some strange caricature? So I found him. It was loads of fun to do, but it was hard. And I have no assistants. I don't know what they would do, in fact, because the important thing is it has to be in my head. I mean, it doesn't do any good if it's in their head or if they just compile notes and hand them to me, because I wouldn't have assimilated it. Anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, but only that, but you don't always know what you're looking for, do you?
No, and what's wonderful is that if you're doing it yourself, you will come across things that the assistant, no matter how well-meaning, it wouldn't mean anything to them. Because I found this sentence that I thought was a real key to Elizabeth when I was on the way to look for something else, and it said, when she was under stress, she took consolation in the classics rather than the scriptures. That every time she had some, like, crisis in her life, she didn't go and read the Bible. She read Homer or Cicero or something. And I thought, now that tells you a lot about her, how her mind worked. First, she was not basically a religious person. which is probably one reason she was so tolerant, but also that that's where she got her strength from. But I saw it en route to something else. I found the most helpful thing for me was taking a screenwriting course. When I was stuck with Henry VIII, and it was getting very long, it was filled with details, it was all the things that people do that are novices, and I somehow decided to take this screenwriting course, and one of my assignments was to, well, we could do any kind of scene, so I chose the scene where Henry VIII puts Thomas of Becket's corpse on trial. He goes to the cathedral, they pry off the coffin lid, and there's this skeleton in these robes, and he puts him on trial. And it was very vivid, and at that point my editor said, you know, my writing really changed because I think it forces you. The danger of historical novels is they become very dull. They're either pot boilers, in which case they're just this superficial thing, or else they're so ponderous and so heavy. And the screenwriting forces you to focus the action so that you don't have a lot of this wordy kind of stuff. And then once I'd done it as a screenplay, it was easy to do it as a real scene in the novel, which I think is chapter 62. I was looking for it the other day. It really helped me to say, okay, it's got to be visual. I mean, a historical novel should be visual. That's why you're going to the ancient world or the Renaissance or whatever. You want to see those things, and you want to feel them and taste them and smell them. And I think if you picture it as a movie, that's my unorthodox advice. But it really helped me.